Special Operations Training Detachment, SOTD West, Burro Team. Coming at you from NTC, Off the Radar.
This is Off the Radar. I'm Captain Weston Rich, an Observer Coach Trainer for the Green Berets at the National Training Center. Welcome to part 2 of our special mashup interview with Pineland Underground. If you haven't listened to part 1, give that a listen now and then come back to finish this episode. Last time we covered what Special Operations Training Detachment is, what a rotation can look like, and ways to prepare for a rotation. In part 2, you will hear what makes a combat training center different than the ARSOF training center, lessons learned during rotations, and hear success stories from rotations. So let's get back into it.
Not to stir up any friendly competition here, but for a lot of our folks that are listening within the ARSOF regiment, some of us are familiar with the ARSOF training center out at Wismar at White Sands Missile Range. How does your guys' setup differ, compare, and contrast to that?
Yeah, so I've done both. As a fifth grouper, I went out and did a rotation out there. Yeah. It's a lot different in a couple of aspects. And what I will say is that, down at Wismar, you've got not every Sage Eagle exercise is the same. Yeah. So, you have probably a wide variety, whether you go with kind of their standard offerings or you're, building your own scenario and doing that. But what you don't have is a dedicated partner force the size of an armored cavalry regiment, for one.
Preparing for a LISCO type of environment. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. So kind of that free play force on force environment, you don't necessarily get that to the same level. And I know they've got contracted role players that go out to target. So it's a little more localized in terms of their standard offering. So that's one. Also, the backside support at NTC is unbelievably deep. Mm-hmm. And, Wes, obviously he gets to see that on a daily basis from the SOF plans perspective, but that's on the conventional side as well. The backside team at NTC is very robust, and we're really helping to facilitate a very robust and deep scenario every single day, to include replicating higher headquarters on the backside, to include replicating all sorts of external elements that just play into making it a more realistic training event. So I think for that reason, those are some of the major differences between Sage Eagle and one of the CTCs. But, at the end of the day, I think that it's really two different intents too, because at the end of the day, if I understand it right, 1st Special Forces Command really intends the ARSOF Training Center to be a validation center, which, as we mentioned in the beginning, we're not evaluators, we're not validators. So the intent of the CTCs is to prepare for large-scale combat operations. Sure. So I think that at the intent level is where it differs too.
No, I mean, beautifully said, Phil. And again, I take myself back to being in S3 at 4th Battalion, 5th Group, and a lot of it comes down to availability and timing, right?
Absolutely.
We were training up to be a SOTF, kind of a different setup. Our 4th Battalions aren't really designed naturally to be SOTFs, but we got ourselves there, right? And we were looking at, based on availability and deployment timelines, like which venue could we use, and both NTC and the ARSOF TC were not available. So here's kind of a sales pitch for SOF is we made our own at a place called Camp Atterbury. And that's a whole nother episode in itself, right? Phenomenal infrastructure there. But to your point, not a lot of backside support. We kind of had to build that and bring that with us. But in the SOF world, we got a Chinese menu of options of which to train at. Got a ton. And it all comes down to, number one, your mission, then availability and timing of how you can train up effectively for that mission. So, and you guys are just one of those top pivotal platforms to do that.
I'm a little biased. I think NTC is the best place to come train at.
I wanted to stir the pot.
That makes me think of realistic military training, which you can do at your Special Forces or CA PSYOP group. But NTC and JRTC do incorporate realistic military training in their rotations, so you are not confined to the box solely. as a conventional unit, you go to one of these centers and you train inside the box and you maneuver inside the box. And as a ARSOF unit, likely a good chunk of your rotation will be there, but you can go to outstations. And at NTC, we have expanded the training area to include other military installations as well as civilian and government land that we have access to do a wide variety of training. I mean, teams come in when they land at the airport, they get pulled into secondary.
Yes, they do. You took the words right out of my mouth. As an S3, we had some specialty teams in fifth group that you were going out to your guys' AO for a rotation, but they only were going out for a few select things.
Right.
And that's why I bring up the menu options. Is they were like, "Sir, we don't want to go out there for the whole 28-day, experience, right? We need to go out there to train specifically on these sensitive activity tasks that are going to take us 5 days."
Mm-hmm.
And so back and forth with your guys' team, multiple generations ago before you guys being there in that speed. I mean, Phil was at fifth group with me during all this. NTC was able to provide that. They did it. They got out and they're like, "Oh yeah, the rest of the scenario is going the way it's going. We did our part."
Yeah, but it's
Really
also
cool.
integrated into the scenario.
Yep.
So if there's an
That's right.
ARSOF headquarters, they can feed that information to the conventional force, and they can say whatever side of the forward line of troops it's happening on, the coalition side or the enemy side, they can give that information to the joint force.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Excellent. So something, and not to derail here, but I'm the product of the Missouri public school system, so I need to go back and kind of review the minutes because we've covered a lot of territory just within the last 30, 35 minutes that we've been chatting here.
Yeah.
So, the discussion of like the multi-domain operations, everything you guys are doing out there, and that you are bringing to those soft elements that are coming out there to train. Bringing in partners and, all of the potential there, seeing the integration, the crosstalk, hopefully, and everybody's rowing the same direction between the conventional forces and SOF. But it kind of pulls me back. And it was something that we spent a bit of time talking about, and it was going back to basics. And I'm a grumpy old man, so I mean, technology confuses and frightens me. So it's like the basics were, kind of where I cut my teeth. And for a lot of those soldiers coming up, it just hasn't been the case. So it's a significant learning curve for them on their way up. So I guess my question would be, what are some lessons learned, like that you have observed, like overall? Okay, every time the same sort of thing happens, or the same theme, besides, the over-reliance on technology or cell phones, like Keith brought up. But if you would, guys, floor is yours.
Yeah, I'll jump in with one, and we get asked about this a lot, actually, and that is, how do we manage our electromagnetic signature?
Yeah.
It's obviously a big topic when we look at the conflict in Ukraine right now, and it's the sort of thing that'll get you killed almost as easily as getting seen by the enemy and shot by a bullet, because there's so much high-tech sensing equipment that the enemy has that when you're putting signals out into the environment, they're seeing these signals and then they're doing something about it. They may be calling artillery on you or whatever the case may be. So, as a detachment in particular, or a headquarters in an expeditionary posture, like if you have to punch into the behind enemy lines territory, how do you survive out there without them just sensing you? So really and I'm going to go back to the basics, and Keith, I'm stealing some of your thunder here, but from what you talked about earlier, there's a few things that you can do to survive. I think really the first one is, if you have the ability to know and measure what you look like in the electromagnetic spectrum, do that. And at the Special Forces group level and within ARSOF, we've got electronic warfare specialists with equipment. We've got, SOTDs with equipment that can help us to understand ourselves. They can do other things too, but that's one thing that we recommend. The second thing, and this is back to the basics again, use comms windows, right? I think back when I was in the Special Forces Q course, it's like, hey, my comms window is at 06 every morning or whatever it might be, or maybe it shifts day to day, right?
Yep.
And I'm only going to send comms during that period of time. So that way, if the enemy's looking for me at 3 p.m., I'm not transmitting anything, right? So use comms windows, whatever that needs to look like. And then the third thing, which, I mean, when you think about it, makes sense, use some mitigating TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures to be able to keep the enemy from pinpointing the transmission, because we're going to assume that they can collect it. If you put it in the environment, we're going to assume they can see it.
Sure.
But what I mean by this is, hey, offset from your patrol base when you shoot your comms, right? I think we learned that in the SFQC too, right? Like back to the basics. Use terrain masking to allow, the giant hill that's in front of you in the direction of the ground-based electronic warfare collection equipment that you think the enemy has. Like put something between you and them. And that may not keep the satellites from collecting on you, but it definitely helps at the tactical level. The people who are shooting their artillery may not be immediately connected to that national level overhead type stuff. So that helps a lot. Know when you have your equipment in passive versus active mode. Counter UAS gets folks in trouble sometimes. They've got these cool jamming systems that the enemy flies a quadcopter overhead, and it throws out this big jamming signal to get the quadcopter out of there because you're afraid it's going to get you, and it might. But guess what? That also sent up a huge signal that now the enemy can see. So they may just go ahead and call for fire on you now if they know where you're at. So those are some examples. But shoot your comms and then move, offset, shoot your comms, different stuff like these are the basic TTPs that really help people to survive in that type of environment.
I'm going to riff off of that, and hopefully Keith jumps in to make sure I don't go off the rails and check me as an NCO. But when we say basics, we mean like principles of patrolling, and then the ability to shoot, move, communicate, sustain, and medicate. And then like previously I mentioned, if you're not used to operating on vehicles, like at home station, practice on vehicles, figure out your vehicle loadout, and then how you're going to camouflage yourself, whether you're at NTC or JRTC. The camouflage is different, but the principles remain the same. Terrain masking, fitting into vegetation, using bliss, those kind of things. And then do some rehearsals on, okay, our truck's loaded out and we have to stop and do a map check. Okay, is that a short halt? Is that a long halt? What do those look like for us? When we pull into a patrol base or a mission support site, what are we trying to accomplish? Granted, terrain is going to dictate the shape of our formation. And then the thing of like, okay, our most casually producing weapon goes on the highest avenue of approach or the most likely avenue of approach. Are those the same thing? Maybe not. So just those considerations. And those are like talking points. They're not like the focus of what our after action reviews are on, because you can train on all that stuff at home station, and you should be, and most teams are, because they're dedicated and ready soldiers that want to go be able to maneuver on the enemy and destroy them or do whatever the nation calls us to do. But you come to a combined training center mainly to do some mission command and some higher level training in terms of not just using the tech as an excuse or saying higher level training, but like really those comms windows go down to mission command, because you could say at 06, we're going to do a comms window, but maybe you're in a tick or you're maneuvering and you can't set up your high frequency antenna. So you have to maneuver, or you have to do things that make sense. And then understanding how the battlefield is changing over time, maybe you have to change your comms to fit that, because maybe there's an enemy force really close to you at the time you're supposed to transmit, so you have to wait. Or maybe there's a battle raging on and you have a message you really need to get to the AOB, so it's less risky for you to transmit because the enemy is focused on the conventional force.
Yeah.
So,
and it all comes down to, are you providing that effect synchronized with the joint force to enable their maneuver, right? Like that's the thing that we're going to focus on in our AARs, like Wes is talking about. But all of these basics, you got to have those. Those are the cornerstone, the foundation to get to that effect.
And then like integrating fires. So everybody on the team should be able to do a call for fire. It shouldn't just be the JTAC or the FO. Everybody should be able to do that. And then the detachment leadership needs to tell They give the guidance of what actually is worth calling for a call for fire, because it needs to match the high priority target list for the conventional force. Otherwise, they're not going to expend, or the joint force, they're not going to expend munitions on it. Yeah. And then it needs to make sense for it to be shot, because shooting it provides a risk. Because if you're out there deep behind enemy lines and all of a sudden something hits the ground, they're going to think, oh boy, they got observed from somewhere and they're going to come find you.
Yeah. Yeah. And with that though, it's just doing the right thing. It's doing the hard right. So like you mentioned, if you have a communication you need to make with the AOB, like it's pretty urgent, you need to make it, and you don't want to take the time to displace. Well, that's fine. Get your set pack up, get whatever you need to send that communication. But once that's done, now you got to consider moving. And I think that's something that we see quite a bit is, those basics are sometimes disregarded. Do we want to stay a little more comfortable and stay in our nice little spot right here? Or do we want to do the right thing, break all the camo nets down, pack the vehicles up and actually displace, move to a new site? The thing I think that's really interesting about both the CTCs is just kind of like you said, the Chinese menu of different flavors. Even between the two CTCs, there's pretty different flavors. You've got NTC that has enormous lines of sight, vast expanses of flat terrain with extremely elevated terrain. I'd say most of it enables, mounted movements. And sometimes you have to remind the teams like, hey, you don't have to get your razor to the crest of this hill. Sometimes it makes sense to dismount right here and do a 3K foot movement, as opposed to JRTC where you have, the heavily wooded, marshy areas where it's more like traditional patrol base operations and I would argue a lot more foot movement.
No, I'm personally, and this is a selfish thing here, but I'm very happy that you guys are here with us today, because literally in 48 hours, I'm going out with about 200 cadets from the University of Notre Dame and a few other universities, and doing like Styx lanes with them.
Oh, that's great.
That's
gonna be awesome.
So what a great refresher that you guys have and I'm just thinking, the whole time while you guys are saying stuff, and it's all stuff that we know and that we've trained as Green Berets with. But to Keith's fabulous point, you get very comfortable, right? Mm-hmm. We get very comfortable. We're humans, man. We get comfortable. Our partner forces get comfortable, and then in a wartime environment, whether it's LISCO, whether it's the global war on terror, whether it's counterinsurgency, unconventional warfare, you name it, comfort kills.
Yep.
Complacency kills. I think all of us
Absolutely.
have left a secured location at one time or another in any of the theaters we've probably all been to, and there's signs as you leave that says complacency kills.
Yep.
Maybe that just is turn on your jammers or make sure your weapon's locked and loaded. Those are the little things we got to do. So I personally want to thank you guys for bestowing or reminding me of that knowledge, because my AARs to a lot of these cadets out there is going to be a lot of this stuff in a very Barney style, broken down, tactical way, with of course a little recruiting pitch on there going, hey, that squad react to contact, squad attack that you just did was phenomenal. Now do it with 400 Afghans, so
that's right.
and that's what we're trying to, as SOF, that's the graduate level stuff that we're doing. And you guys are the playground at NTC that's doing it there. That's awesome.
It's
impressive.
Yeah. It's fun and rewarding. It really is.
Yeah. And I also don't want to make it seem like it's all negative, negative observations we have.
You're seeing great stuff.
We do.
Recently, we just had a team that conducted a 12K foot infill, which was awesome. I mean, it looked like a pretty murderous route too. I was not envious of them.
Yeah,
but
over a mountain.
Yeah,
through like feet of snow. Yeah, it was nasty.
They're like, hey, hey, OCTs, keep up. Here we go.
Yeah, they did great.
Yeah. And so it was awesome to see. Because
that's a great point that you bring up. Are you guys seeing some innovative stuff that is new every rotation that folks are doing? I mean, do you have any examples maybe that we can go into of just whoa, I never thought of that. let's add that to the menu.
I don't know about never thought of it, but
Yeah, sure.
simple example, I OC'd a team, an MFF team that had a previous instructor on
Military
on the team.
free fall.
There you go, military
Gotcha.
free fall.
I'm there. I missed about 7 others, but like we're good.
And he was tandem qualified, so they jumped in a space soldier that had a very specific widget with a very specific capability, and they were able to use that at a very specific time to enable a joint force maneuver.
Had the space soldier ever been cannonballed out of an aircraft before?
No.
Nope. I don't think he'd ever been to airborne school at all. And they were like, hey, strap on this guy and just go for it. So
Once in a lifetime
I did
experience
that.
with that guy.
I did that a few.
That was great.
That's awesome. I did that a few years ago with a also non-airborne qualified 79 Romeo recruiter, because I was at Yuma doing recruiting, and I'm a Halo guy, so I was like, I'm gonna get a jump in, and he thought he was just on the aircraft like to take pictures, and I was like, no, you're getting strapped to that dude, and you're gonna, and he's like, I'm not even. It doesn't matter. You're good.
It's okay. He is.
But that's cool. Creative solutions. So
I'd say another one is drones.
Oh,
We're
yeah,
seeing
yeah.
a lot more drones. Well, first I'll start by saying our enemy force, Black Horse,
they're innovating too.
they've got some different types of drones. They can do drone swarms. I don't know exactly how many they have. They can do drone swarms of like over 100 systems.
Wow.
And so we're starting to do a lot more drones, but we use that in the SOF against our RTUs as, replicating enemy drones against you, but also we're seeing the special forces groups starting to send their guys out with more drones.
Yeah.
A lot of first person view drones, FPV drones with some different capabilities. And, they may strap some explosive on there, use it kind of like a kamikaze attack style, or put some kind of cool camera, thermal, whatever the case may be, some kind of payload on there. We had a team come out, they were dropping grenades off of, we actually did a live fire. This was part of live fire outside of the force on force, but they were dropping live grenades off of the drone
They
onto
also
targets.
passed a loitering munition
that's
from
right.
one team to another team. And then that second team did the terminal guidance on it.
Yeah, the Hero 120,
cool.
if you've heard of that one.
Have not.
So about a javelin size warhead glide munition. I think I'm sure this wasn't close to its capability, but they flew that thing. They launched it from the friendly rear area, flew it about 30K, handed it off to a ODA that was in behind enemy lines, and they took control of it and did terminal guidance down onto an air defense target on the ground.
Wow.
That is phenomenal.
Very sexy.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Man. Yes, tell me more.
I've got one more example. Try not to be too long-winded. But recently had a team that was playing the Red SOF, playing for the enemy forces, and during their infill, they had intel of a company of armor on the other side of this ridgeline. That initially their plan was to launch a drone, an organic drone, and try to fix exactly where they were at. Their drone had issues immediately. It went about 20 feet up in the air, and something happened. One of the propellers came crashing right back down. But what was really good that I saw this team did was, instead of just being like, whatever, it's NTC, it's training, we'll just send it and hope it turns out for the best. They treated it very real. It stopped their movement for a good, hour and a half, 2 hours. They were even considering, hey, do we turn back here because we don't want to drive headlong into a company of tanks? And instead, they got online with the OP4 task force, so it's called Reaper, out at NTC, and they coordinated a movement and a call for fire to be able to mask their movement north of where they did fix this company of tanks being. It was awesome. It was great.
Smoke and mirrors, yeah.
Yeah, it was great problem solving to see. It was, and it was the use of 2 different drone platforms.
Wow.
Yeah.
Synchronizing different headquarters, synchronizing effects.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's a lot. You make it sound very simple. There's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh no, it wasn't. Yeah, and it wasn't simple. It it did take them a significant amount of time to coordinate it, but it was really great to see them, treat it like it would be life and life.
No, yeah, that's important.
Absolutely.
And I'll add to that, like, we talked a lot about the special operations units working with the conventional units on the blue side, but as Keith mentioned, we do have people go on the opposing force side, and at NTC they work with 11th ACR, at JRTC they work with 1 509th Parachute Infantry, and they really capitalize on the ability to have that Special Operations Forces, Conventional Force, Integration, Interoperability, Interdependence training objective, as well as they get to be kind of the masters of their own destiny more so than the Blue Force side, because it's on that detachment, CA team, PSYOP detachment, whatever they are, to interface with the opposing force leadership and be like, here's my elevator pitch. This is what I can and can't do, and this is what I want to do. Does that mess with your objectives? And then they can go. And the minute they get on the ground and start building that rapport, the better they will have effects and better training they receive while they're at the combined training centers.
Yeah. The autonomy. Yeah, the absolute autonomy. And I mean, again, from a recruiting perspective, like that's what you guys by and large are producing the interoperability and integration between conventional forces and our SOF operators and units, probably more so than you're seeing in real life or any other installation out there right now. I can tell you just from as a SORB executive officer, there are tons of places across CONUS and OCONUS footprints of the United States Army where for the first time in a long time, you have a lot of young and even middle-aged and middle-of-the-road soldiers that have never worked with SOF before. Yeah. And in an environment like what NTCs and the CTCs and you guys in SOTD are providing, that is the answer for the next fight. Like the 82nd Airborne being with 3rd Group, the 101st being with 5th Group, like you guys are providing that playground that currently does not exist.
Yeah,
not a fan of the forever wars, but
sure, yeah.
But there is that is critical for the next big thing that we got coming.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we get a lot of good opportunity too to just interface with leaders from the conventional force. Yeah. And I mean, listeners may not know this, but at JRTC and NTC, I mean, the conventional force is choosing their top folks, their top officers and NCOs to go and work on the backsides of these exercises and be the observer coach trainers, the leaders with, on the backside of this thing. So we get the opportunity to interface with those folks and really build some common understanding that gets re-injected into the force. And honestly, on the soft side too, we are able to hopefully take a little bit of that back to the groups, back to the units after we leave.
No,
SOTD.
Phil, that's amazing, because I remember a few months ago, I handed a recruiting business card to a conventional force infantry brigade commander. And he goes, oh, I'm a little too old. I'm not going to Camp McCall anytime soon. I said, no, sir, but you got people that will in your formation. And I also need you to play nice with the Siege SOTF and SOTF commanders and all the other echelons of command that we have in SOF in the next joint fight or combined fight, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So speaking of innovation, I think you guys have been innovating a little bit with your internal and external communications. Tell me a little bit about this podcast that you guys have out there in the desert.
Yeah, absolutely. So
what do you got going on?
Special Operations Training Detachment has our own podcast. It's called Off the Radar. Kind of an idea that I had, and then met a awesome CA NCO at NTC that later joined the Burro team, Sergeant Maicke Pop, who had the knowledge and equipment to make it a possibility. I'll backtrack a touch. When I was at 1st Group, I went out to the first JPMRC, or Joint Pacific Multinational Rotation, whatever.
There you go. Hey,
all those letters.
That's a long one. Most of it.
That was a good 75%.
Yeah. I know the P is Pacific because I was an Indo-PACOM guy, so
sure.
The most important letter in that one right there. But anyways, 25th ID was doing a internal 25th ID training that became a training center, and this was the first rotation, and 1st Group went out to it, and I got attached to the company that I later became a detachment commander in, and my job was to be the SOF liaison to the brigade. So I got exposure to the CTCs right away as a SOF guy, and I hadn't even been on a detachment yet, and I was like, how do I prepare for this? What would I do? And it left a mark on me, and when I found out I was going to go to NTC, I was like, well, if I was a detachment commander, how would I prepare for NTC or JRTC? Knowing myself, with every good intention, I probably would not be out there reading doctrine as much as would be beneficial. So I was like, is there something out there in the podcast space that exists for CTCs. And at the time, there wasn't. NTC and JRTC do have their own podcasts, but there was nothing SOF specific. Pineland Underground existed at that time, and so did SOFcast and Indigenous Approach, but they all have their own flavor, and they're not focused on the combined training centers.
Sure.
So I was like, this is probably a niche that we could get into. And then working at SOTD, just constantly topics of how do we get out to the training units beforehand so they can prepare? What are we doing to message to them? And at a SOTD entire like working group day that we did, I mentioned it and it was not rebuffed. So I was like, we will drive on. And luckily the AOB West leadership from the NCO and officer side supported it. And then the SOTD leadership, previous leadership and current leadership also supported it. So we drove on, we figured out, muddled through the processes of getting it approved, and we started launching episodes last summer. So we're at whatever that makes us, 9-10 months old, and we are driving forward. We try to publish every Thursday. Sometimes we don't make that mark, but we've got 34 episodes out currently.
Awesome. That's awesome.
With multiple more in the works. So
we were just talking about reducing digital signatures. I think we've increased yours, and rightfully so. So for all of our listeners out there, absolutely tune in, especially our in-service crowd. You know, if you're a civilian out there and just interested in special forces, and you want to get crazy down into the weeds of our training evolutions and how we do stuff, by all means, all the power to you. Listen. But for our listeners out there that are junior leaders in the SOF environment and in to future join our ranks, like, this is a great source of information. I've listened to a few episodes; they're awesome. And Clay, I think we should do some collaboration with them in the future. You know what I mean?
I think that needs to happen.
You think it's a good idea?
Yep.
Approved.
Yep.
Okay, there we go.
Yep.
Yeah, if you are a reader, though, definitely get with your USASOC lessons learned representative. Each of the groups and regiments have those. So,
they do.
We put out, and this is if you want to get into the weeds of at the secret level, like each of these elements, you can read at that level. But I really do think that the podcast is such an accessible way to learn.
No, that's absolutely. It's going to give you generalities. It's going to, like we say in the recruiting world, we are not going to show you the book of spells, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are not going to take you behind the curtain and divulge, G2 or Intel or TTPs on how we make Green Berets. We are going to make it less scary.
Yeah.
Give you the tools and to prepare and make you best for the tryout. In your guys' case, the training evolution, right? So that you can be successful and get ourselves more lethal and more ready to do the next thing we got to do.
That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. It just hopefully gets that team room conversation going. And then if you're on the docket to come to a CTC, reach out to SOTD.
Yeah.
We are all happy to assist and give you some insight and ways to prepare.
Excellent, guys.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us today. Excellent to have you in the studio. Phil, great to see you again.
Great to see you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, boys. Appreciate it.
We're not going to talk about the mustache. Can we talk about the mustache?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
We don't have to put out
in a good way or a bad way. What are we doing?
Well, I've been so quiet the entire time. I'm just lost in it.
It's voluptuous.
It is. For those of you, well, let me try that again. Since you can't see Sergeant First Class Keith Wade, I will tell you that he has probably one of the most just impressive lip ferrets that I have seen in a month of Sundays. I mean,
but I also want to say that, for the first group CSM that's listening out there, Sergeant Wade is completely within regulations.
100%. 100%.
Completely within regulations,
regulations.
And is ready to be a senior member of a detachment in the illustrious first special forces group.
Of course. And how did you describe it earlier? Tom Selleck-esque?
Tom Selleck, not esque.
Oh, hey, careful. There can be only one.
When he introduced himself to me, I said, "You are Tom Selleck."
Maybe is there some blood relation?
That's an extremely high standard.
Hey, got to live up to it, man.
Hey, we set the standard high in special operations, so.
Thank you for listening to Off the Radar, where ARSOF prepares for conflict. Like,
subscribe, and share on your listening platform. Actions will determine the outcome.